course, as I write this all down in my journal back in the confines of my bedroom, I wish I could go back to my first time inside the ice house and stop myself from proceeding any farther. There were warning signs even then of the nightmare that was to unfold. I should, for example, have noticed that as I progressed down the tunnel, my shoes weren't making a single sound upon the ground. But I was too preoccupied with thoughts of my dad. Instead, I was almost halfway along the passage before I realised that the only noise was the echoing of my breath. I paused and focused the torch beam at the floor. At first glance, I thought it was covered with a thickly woven carpet, but when I crouched down to touch the fibres, I recoiled at speed, realising that they were matted strands of hay. Being this close to the passage floor, the clawing scent was far worse, and I thought I could detect a strong waft of animal urine amongst the many other odious smells. Rats, I heard myself say in a repeated echo that seemed to make my announcement even worse. The sound of my breathing intensified as my heart began to pound. There was no evidence of droppings, but if this place had been used to store food, there was a good chance that rodents would also live down here. I began to feel itchy and in need of a bath at the very thought of them. I had to work hard to dispel the thought that this tunnel would suddenly flood with a sea of undulating hairy bodies. "Don't be such a fool," I reprimanded myself, slowly standing up and casting the torch beam back down the section of tunnel which I had just navigated. I could just make out the arched entranceway, and beyond that the main body of the ice house. It would be the work of a moment to make my way back down there. After all, I had certainly progressed further into the tunnel than I had intended. I didn't want to push my luck with a failing torch battery. I felt the breeze against my neck, and once again my nose was assailed by a multitude of nauseous fumes. Had I been in any doubt about heading for home, this unpleasant interlude was a timely reminder that the end of the tunnel clearly contained something I didn't wish to find. I was just about to move when behind me I distinctly heard the sound of something sharp scratching against the brickwork. This unexpected noise was accompanied by a violent exhalation of a rattling breath. I froze, rooted to the spot, just as surely as if I had been concreted there. The scratching came again, and this time the noise that followed it was more like the hissing of a serpent. I felt beads of sweat break out across my temple and a familiar lurching in my stomach. Fear descended upon me with devastating fury. I was helpless. I tried to suppress my own accelerated breathing, which, amplified by the grim passageway, sounded louder than a bugle call. There was some sort of animal behind me. It was gibbering now and moving very quickly from foot to foot. I could hear the excitement of its breathing and then an audible growl of aggression. Whatever it was clearly agitated by my presence beyond reasonable control. Where the strength came to run, I will never know. But once I started, an Olympian couldn't have made it out of the tunnel any quicker. The unseen beast was on the move as well, gurgling with the excitement of the chase. It sounded as though it was struggling to see clearly in the darkness, and I was certain I heard it strike the walls of the tunnel as it flailed after me. As I burst into the main chamber of the ice house, I was struck with a sudden whirling disorientation. My torch beam, now a mere dribble of amber light, failed to highlight the staircase escape route, and instead I found myself spinning around like a miniature lighthouse, crying in sheer desperation. It was then that I saw it. I caught just a fleeting glimpse of it as my torch beam picked out its shape. Something very tall and horribly thin that darted out of the tunnel, moving so quickly that it was impossible to define any features. I threw the torch in the general direction of the shape, a panicked reaction which I instantly regretted as I now found myself in total darkness. The torch clattered upon the flagstones, the beam dying on impact as the casing broke open and divulged the spent batteries upon the floor. My action, though rash, had the desired effect of distracting my pursuer. It changed direction to follow the sound of the breaking torch, and now I heard its hideous gibbering as it briefly paused to examine the smashed remains. I lurched several paces forward, striking my outstretched fingertips against solid brickwork. The pain made me call out, and instantly the gibbering ceased. I had to clamp one of my hands over my mouth to stop myself from screaming out. It was listening intently, waiting for me to move again. I felt along the wall, following the bricks. I no longer had any sense of direction. All I could do was move away from the creature. I took small steps, focusing on keeping as quiet as possible. I couldn't be sure, but it didn't sound as though I was being followed. When my scrabbling hands finally slipped from the bricks into empty space, I almost cried out with triumph. This was the staircase that led up to salvation. I abandoned all care and raced up the steps at speed, following the tight spiral as quickly as I could reach the door. It took me a moment to realise that it was now closed shut, and as I reached it and turned the handle, it failed to open. "Oh God! Oh please God, help me!" I stammered, rattling the handle as though I intended to rip it free of the wood. "Daddy, please, help me!" I cried, kicking the bottom of the door so that the heavy timber quivered against the frame. And then I froze, and my heart tightened like a vice. Something had just kissed the back of my neck. I could feel thick, wet strands of drool tattooing the spot where its lips had just offended my skin. The heavy scent of urine and decay intensified, obliterating any doubt that it might have been caused by rats. A pressure descended upon my right shoulder, slight at first, and then I felt a decisive grip. I couldn't bear to look down. I tried to focus solely on the door, willing it to open. I was shaking with fear, my body now a trembling mass of useless limbs. My strength was draining out through my pores, and I felt lightheaded. The grip on my shoulder tightened, and I slowly cast my gaze downwards, expecting to see a hand clamped there. Instead of fingers, all I saw were 4 crooked twigs. My screams would have woken the dead.